Hello and welcome to Get to Know Them podcast. This is a podcast in which I'm gonna talk with some of the world's highest performers in order to learn more about them. I'm your host, Cameron Shurigoy. I hope you enjoy. Okay, so who do we get to know today?
My name is Dede Griesbauer.
And who is Dede Griesbauer? What do you do, Dede?
I do I do a lot of things. I'm probably best known as a professional triathlete. I'm a 20-year veteran of the sport. I've been racing professionally for 20 years now. I'm also a coach. I am also a commentator for Ironman. So you may have heard me on some of the live broadcasts for Ironman, calling the races. I'm a wife to an amazing husband named Dave, and I have two Labradors, Piper and Charlie, and I live in Boulder, Colorado.
That's very interesting. You obviously do a lot of stuff, but tell me, how did you actually get into triathlon and then more specifically into professional triathlon?
My background is swimming. I was a swimmer as a kid growing up, mostly because I'm not athletic at all, and all other sports were a colossal failure. So my parents put me in a pool because it seemed like a safe place for an unathletic kid. Um, I swam in college, was very fortunate to be a part of the Stanford women's swim program. Won two NCAA championship titles with Stanford, was part of the US national team for a number of years. And when I retired from swimming, I started running just to sort of keep my fitness up. I took a bike trip across the country with a boy I was dating at the time. We ended up breaking up in Montana, but it introduced me to cycling. And so when I was at business school, I actually turned on the TV and I saw the Ironman on TV, and I thought that's super cool. And I knew I had the background in swimming. I had taken the bike trip, so I knew how to ride a bike, and I had run my first marathon when I was in business school. So I decided to tie them all together and try an Ironman. The Ironman was actually my first ever triathlon, so I went all in.
So you did your first Ironman and it was love at first sight.
It was. I really enjoyed the process. I enjoyed the race itself. It was a challenge like none other that I'd had. But I will say, when I did my first Ironman, I was one and done. I had a job to go to off on Wall Street. I had no intention of having triathlon be my job. I literally did it for the experience and then moved to New York City and was working on Wall Street and sort of put triathlon on the shelf for a few years until I came back to it. Kind of curious to do it again and try to train a little smarter and race a little better. And of course, I did none of those things when I entered a race several years later, but still in that race managed to qualify as an age grouper for the Ironman World Championship. And that's when I hired a coach and got a little bit more serious about it.
And then you went on from there into the professional sport.
Yeah, I raced for 2 years as an age grouper under the guidance of my very first coach, who was Karen Smyers, one of our sports all-time legends. And I was so blessed to be able to learn from Karen and really emulate everything that Karen did. I would train with her and try to emulate her run form. And, especially on the bike, I would ride behind her. And when she would shift, I would shift. And when she would get in her bars, I would get in my bars. And I literally just followed everything that Karen did. And after racing as an age grouper for 2 years, we were actually doing an indoor trainer session one night at her house. And she looked over at me. She's like, would you ever consider quitting your job and racing professionally? And without even thinking, like, it just came from my gut. I was like, yes, absolutely. And I went home that night and I asked my husband, and he looked at me when I posed the question, said, if you don't go in and quit your job tomorrow, I'll go in and quit it for you. So he was really supportive. I don't think he thought that 20 years later we would still be doing this. I think at the time we thought it would be a year or two in this really cool experience, but it's turned into something else altogether.
So tell me, what's the thing that you like the most about triathlon and which thing do you dislike the most?
The thing I like the most is that you really never master it. There are always ways that you can improve, even when you have a great race where everything seems to click and go well. There's ways to get better. I think if you ask even any of our Ironman world champions, or I train with Taylor Knibb, and Taylor's known for dominating races, but as soon as she crosses the finish line, she's recounting all of the things that she did wrong and all the ways that she can get better. And that's one of the things I love. You never really master it. There's always a way to find ways to get better, and whether that means a better result or just becoming a better version of yourself. that's what I love about it, is that you can literally spend a lifetime doing it and keep finding ways to improve. The thing that I like least about it, it's just part of life. You don't always get what you deserve. And when you put in all of the hard work and all of that discipline and dedication to make all of these changes and improvements, you can get to race day and not get what you deserve out of it. And it's our sport is heartbreaking and really thankless in that regard. But that's life. It's a lesson for life.
Yeah, exactly. Tell me, what do you think has contributed the most to your longevity in sport?
Um, Honestly, my love of it, my love and passion for the sport. Even in really dark times, in times of really career threatening injury, in times where I've had a series of events that have just been thankless and don't reflect the work that I've put in, and I'm not getting the results that I want. At my core, I love what I do. There's times I wish I didn't love it so much. But I really just love it. And I think the fact that I'm willing to take the bad in order to get the good. Yeah, I really value those moments in sport and in my career where things have gone really, really well. And I appreciate those. And I'm willing to tolerate the millions and millions and millions of times that it doesn't, in order to get those precious few moments where it really does. Quite simply, I love what I do. I love the process. I love the training. I love the journey. And even the difficult parts, I think ultimately are what define you, when you look back on what you've achieved. Surviving those difficult moments, I think, makes you stronger. And so I just appreciate all aspects of the sport in that regard.
Yeah, that's a very nice way to put it. Do you maybe have a favorite mantra or a quote that you keep saying to yourself when the things get hard?
Really don't have a mantra. I think it depends on the race, and depends on the objective of the race. During Ultraman, for instance, where you more times than not are not feeling very good in the race, I would just tell myself that forward is progress. Anything that is propelling me forward is progress. But different races, it's different things, and it really depends on what my goal and objectives that I set out and my coach sets out with me before the race really are. And those often tend to be process oriented. So I don't really repeat things other than process oriented tasks during a race, to be honest.
So, what would you say has been the biggest success, both in your life in general and in sports?
Gosh, my life in general, I think for a kid who wasn't very athletic and lacked all sorts of any kind of physical talent whatsoever, I think athletically what I have achieved is outstanding. And I've done it on hard work and passion alone, because it hasn't been done on talent. I'm not one of those athletes that was plucked at a young age and said, wow, this kid's really got something, like let's harness this and turn it into something. I was like the also ran that everyone gave sort of polite applause to because I just wasn't very talented. And so I think, what I have been able to achieve athletically is astounding even to me, because I'm willing to try really hard things and willing to face magnificent failure at the very low possibility of success. And at times I haven't had the success that I've wanted, but I've had more success than I would have ever dreamed of as an 8-year-old with no athletic talent whatsoever. So I think turning my life as an unathletic person into that of an athlete who has been at a world-class level in not one, but two different sports, I think is pretty outstanding. And a great accomplishment of just resilience and persistence and determination, I think, is what defines me, not only as an athlete, but just as a human. If there's something I want or something that I believe in, I'll go for it and fight for it, until I get it.
Yeah, that's a very nice way of approaching things. And I think that in all sports in general, not just in triathlon, these are the factors that all the highest achievers possess. because if you're not dedicated, if you're not a hard worker, you just, that's at least my opinion, you just can't make it to the absolutely top level.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen, obviously in my career, I've seen all sorts of athletes and all sorts of journeys. And to see an athlete with a tremendous amount of talent and not really know what to do with that talent. And often it's the ones with less talent that are forced to like work their way into the position that they want to be in. Those tend to be the success stories. I've seen plenty of really, really talented athletes that just haven't done the work and haven't achieved what their bodies would do for them given the opportunity. And it really is the lucky few that possess both the work ethic and the talent. And those are the once in a generation superstars that we get to see. And it's special to witness.
Yeah, exactly. If we go to the other side now, what do you think has been your biggest failure in your life?
The biggest failure. Oh, I'll say, it had always been a dream to make an Olympic team. Even as someone who had a very low probability of doing so, I just was always inspired by watching the Olympic Games. And I think that it's such a universal thing. You know, it's great. I've had a great number of achievements athletically, but you know, you walk into a room and tell someone you're an Ironman champion, and they're like, okay, great. What's that? But you walk into a room and say that you're an Olympian, and it doesn't matter what country you're in. It doesn't matter whether those people are athletes or not. Everybody knows what the Olympics is. And so I think missing that Olympic team, I went to the Olympic trials twice. The first time I wasn't expected to do much, and I did well, but I wasn't like a contender for the team. The second time I went to the trials, I wouldn't say I was a shoo-in, but had I made it, I don't think it would have been like a shock, but I really wanted that. And it's a goal that I set for myself, a really high goal, that I never got, and I will never get that opportunity back again. And so that's, you know, I would consider that to be a failure, and one that I just have to live with. Not very many people get to do it, and that's what makes it special.
Yeah, exactly. But if you look at it from the more positive side, if you qualified, let's say for the Olympics, then your whole entire life, not just professional career, might change into a totally different direction, and you wouldn't have been so successful as you are now.
No doubt about it. Like, I often wonder if I had made that Olympic team as a swimmer, would I even have pursued triathlon as a sport? I don't know. I might have felt fully satiated and satisfied with my athletic career, my athletic endeavors, that I would have pursued a different path altogether. And maybe part of what made me so enthusiastic to pursue a career in triathlon was to improve upon some of the things I did wrong in my swimming career and try to be, obviously the sports are different, but to be a better and smarter athlete based on what I learned as a swimmer. So I agree 100%. Had I made that Olympic team, I think my life would be very, very different right now. So to that end, maybe it's the best thing that ever happened to me.
Yeah, nobody
But
knows.
it was something that at the time was, at a young age, a fairly crushing dream. Like, it was a massive dream. And so it was crushing not to get to achieve it. But you're definitely in the majority of people when you say, well, I didn't make the Olympic team. Like, most people don't, but to be that close, it would have been super special, I think.
Yeah, I believe that. If we shift gears a bit now and step away from triathlon to some more general questions, what's one thing that you wanted to do for a long time now, but just haven't done it yet?
Oh, I mean, there's like some travel. There's some places that I'd like to go and travel to as a tourist without a bicycle. That would be nice. That's something that I haven't had the opportunity to do. Athletically, I would be curious to um, test myself with some more ultra running type races. I think with my adventures into Ultraman, I think my mindset is definitely suited towards some ultra races. And so I think, like, having just watched Western States yesterday, I think I'm sort of intrigued and inspired by some of that ultra running stuff. Again, I don't know if I'll ever have the opportunity to do it because I am getting older, and I would like to be able to still run when I'm 80. And I think if I try to keep bashing my body, that likelihood is less and less. Um, gosh, I don't like, I'm actually pretty proud of myself that I'm struggling to answer your question, because I'm definitely someone who, when I see something and I want something, I go after it. So there's not a lot of things on my list that I can say I've always wanted to do that and I haven't done it. I've done a lot of the things that I've wanted to do. And I feel very fortunate for that. Like I'm the luckiest person in the world.
I agree with you. That's a nice way of approaching things. So if you could only eat one meal for the rest of your life, which one would it be?
Like generally as meals go, breakfast is my favorite meal. So I would love to have breakfast every meal for the rest of my life. One food specifically, I'm gonna have to go with a really, really good scone. Yeah. I love me a good, like the sweet scones, not so much the savory ones. Yeah, a good sweet, like berry scone or vanilla bean scone with a little frosting on the top. Yeah, I'm gonna go with the good old fashioned scone.
Is that also your guilty pleasure, or do you have any other guilty pleasures?
My guilty pleasure is wine. I do love myself a glass of wine, and I try to limit that because actually I have a pretty good internal governor. Like if I do drink wine, I will never have more than two glasses. I don't want more. And once I have two glasses, I feel done with it. But I do like wine is my guilty pleasure. I do enjoy my wine.
Okay, that's great. What's the one thing that makes you grumpy or annoyed?
Grumpy or annoyed. I like having just traveled yesterday. I really hate airports. I don't like crowded spaces with people that aren't paying attention. And I get annoyed when people just have their heads in their phones and aren't paying attention, and it's impacting where you want to go and get to efficiently. So yeah, I think in general, inefficiency bothers me. I like to be very organized and process oriented. And like when I'm in massive crowds of people with inefficiency, it makes me grumpy. So yeah, airport travel, not for me, which is funny since I do an awful lot of it.
If you could enforce one rule for the entire world, which one would it be?
One rule for the entire world:
Yes.
be kind. We don't all have to agree. And I think the world is a better place because of conflict and differences of opinion. But I believe that those differences of opinion need to be expressed with respect and kindness. I think a little bit of kindness goes an awfully long way. And I think we all get wrapped up in our own little lives and get busy and forget that words like please and thank you matter, and that a little dose of kindness in somebody else's life makes a big, big difference. So if we could all just be kinder to one another, that's a rule I'd like to enforce.
That's a very nice rule. That's a rule that I would be very glad to abide. What do you think is the biggest stereotype about triathlon?
Self-centeredness, I think. I think you have to be obviously highly motivated and focused, and a lot of that focus is on yourself as an athlete in an individual sport that's as demanding as triathlon. And I just think a lot of people get really big egos as a result and have this air of self-importance that sometimes actually makes me laugh, because I'm like, we're triathlon, we're not even that important a sport. Like we're the smallest sport in the world, and yet these people think they're so important because they're good triathletes. Like I think it's kind of funny. It requires a degree of selfishness. I absolutely understand that, and that's what our sport demands. That's how hard it is. But it turns into some interesting personalities for something that in the grand scheme of the entire world really isn't very important at all.
At the start of the podcast, you mentioned your long career and all the things that you've already achieved. But what's the one thing that you still want to achieve in life?
In triathlon, it's sort of intangible. Like I would love to have a race where I feel like it wasn't perfect, because I don't believe that there is a perfect race, but I would love to have a race where I feel like it reflected the work I put in and the fitness level that I'm at. I feel like I haven't really had one of those in a while, and I would like to. I believe if I did have a race like that, it would get me that sort of tangible goal of getting that one more swing at a world championship. And that would be super exciting. I don't know how likely that is, because a lot of things have to go really, really right for me, but that would be one goal. And then my goal in life, honestly, is to continue living the way continue to live a life the way that I feel like I have, with honesty, integrity, hard work, and kindness. Yeah. Simple goals. Be true to myself in whatever I do next outside of triathlon. Yeah. Just to keep living life by my own set of standards, which, like I said, hard work, honesty, integrity, and kindness.
Those are nice standards. I wish more people had standards like that.
I was raised well.
So you said that you still want to have one more swing at the Ironman World Championship. Is that the reason why you still do triathlon, or is there a different reason?
No, it's really not. It's like I think it's silly to have such like one goal, because you could not get that goal and then you end up being completely dissatisfied. Like, I am just genuinely curious. I greet the sport now with sort of an open heart and mind, just to see what's possible. I know that the best of me athletically is in the rearview mirror. I'm fighting the decline, right? Like, I'm working incredibly hard. I'm working harder than I ever have as an athlete to get less bad every day. Like, that's the state. It's the unfortunate state that I'm in because of the level at which I'm racing. I'm fighting the decline. I'm fighting it really, really hard. And so I have to go into the sport with sort of an open mind and remind myself. My coach tries to remind me, she's like, Dede, you're 53 years old. Like, what you're doing, nobody's ever done it before. And the reason nobody's ever done it before is it's really freaking hard. Like, it's really, really hard, and at times entirely unsatisfying. So I have to remind myself that what I'm doing, I'm a unicorn. No one's done it. There's not a manual we can go to. There's not a blog that we can read. There's not a resource or a podcast we can listen to that's going to tell us how to do this, how to race professionally at 53 years old. So I have to keep an open sort of mind and an open heart as to what's possible, and celebrate things when they happen, and try to be a little kinder to myself when they don't, because I am 53.
Yes, but I also think that by doing all this, you're also a role model or a manual, as you said, for other people who are gonna follow your footsteps, and maybe they're gonna take you as a Northern Star. They are gonna look at what you do, how you adapt during all the years that you're doing triathlon, and maybe you're gonna help other people do triathlon or sport, any other sport in general, for such a long time.
I hope so. I hope that I can set an example for the benefits of longevity in sport, and that when I started my career, I started late. I didn't start racing professionally until I was 35, 36 years old. And at the time, you kind of got to 40 and everyone's like, well, you're done, you're 40. And then we had a couple of like 42, 43, maybe a 44-year-old. And the fact that I'm still racing at 53 and Mel McQuaid and Cameron Brown are racing into our 50s, maybe it's telling that 40-year-old, you can have 10 more years in the sport. It's just what you're driven by. You're probably not going to win an Ironman World Championship at 47 as a professional, but there are still great goals that you can chase after you turn 40 in sport. And I think that the more role models we have of people trying to do that and achieve that, the more and more people will be willing to give it a try, and the more unbelievable performances we're going to see. Can we see somebody in the top 10 at 50 years old one day? Gosh, I hope so.
That's such a lovely way to end the podcast. For the last question, I let my guest leave a question for the next upcoming guest to the show. My previous guest was Andrej Vištica, who is also a professional triathlete from Croatia.
Okay.
And his question for you was, what's your biggest regret in your triathlon career?
Not starting triathlon sooner. Somebody had suggested that out of my swim career, that I try triathlon, draft legal, coming off of all that swim fitness. And I was a swimmer who by swimmer standards wasn't a bad runner. By running standards, I'm pretty poor. But somebody had suggested like, hey, you should try this sort of draft legal format. Like you could become a triathlete harnessing all that swim fitness that you have. And at the time I was sort of burnt out on swimming and I turned it down, wanting to just go get a normal job and be a normal person. And I wonder what I could have done in the sport if I had started it at a younger age. Because even by long course standards, I started the sport pretty late. So I guess my one regret would be what might have happened if I had started the sport at a younger age.
So what is your question for the next guest? And I can give you a hint that it's also going to be a professional triathlete.
Okay, it depends a lot on who the athlete is, right? But I guess my question is, and it comes from a place of watching professional triathletes now, half of them seem like they're 50% athlete, 50% social media influencer / running their own media company out the side because that's what's demanded of being a professional triathlete today to get noticed. So I guess my question would be, would you be more enthusiastic about the sport of triathlon or less enthusiastic if there were no such thing as social media?
I think that's a great question. Thank you very much, Dede, for coming on the show, for being so kind, for answering all these questions. To end the show, where can people follow you and learn more about you?
Mostly on Instagram. I'm on Instagram as @Dede Griesbauer. I'm on Facebook too, but I think everything flows through Instagram. So Instagram first. Yeah.
Okay, we're gonna put your Instagram tag into the show notes so people can find and follow you easily. And like I said, thank you very much once again for coming on the show. And I think people are gonna have a lot of takeaways, a lot of positive takeaways from it. Thank you
Well,
very
thanks
much.
for having me. I appreciate the opportunity.